The purpose of this video is to introduce you to some PowerShell basics. Specifically, we're just going to look at command syntax so that you can understand why there are spaces and you know how commands are structured and so on. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to right click on the Windows button and I'm going to click on Run. Notice that it tells us that this task will be created with admin privileges. That's important with PowerShell because most PowerShell commands would require administrative privileges in order to run. It's just a little more protected. So in the open box you can type PowerShell, or you can see that I've already typed it in, so I'm going to click OK. Once I do that, the PowerShell window opens. I will show you another option here. If you right click on this Windows button and go to Run and then type in CMD to bring up a command prompt. This is just a normal command prompt. This is not PowerShell, but if you type PowerShell.exe and hit enter, notice that your prompt here changes to PS, so that shows you that you've actually accessed PowerShell, and it looks a little different, but because it doesn't have the blue background, but you can see because of the PS here that this is PowerShell. Sometimes it's necessary to access PowerShell in this way. For instance, if you are using a server core machine where you only have command line access. Okay, so back to the PowerShell window. So again, this is our prompt. Notice it's the same as it was in the command screen. It's PS, and then you have the default location that it starts out with. Okay, now as far as PowerShell commands, what I'm going to do here is just show you the general command syntax. You always start out with a command name. That's a requirement, and sometimes that's all that's needed. It just depends on what it is exactly that you're trying to do. Then you'll have a dash and a required parameter name, and then a parameter value, and then after that you have optional parameters that can be configured potentially depending on, again, what command you're using and what exactly you're trying to do. But notice the main thing to kind of take notice of here is that number one, after the command you have a space, and then if there is a required parameter name for that command, it'll be started with a dash. And then of course if there is a parameter name, then there's going to be an associated parameter value, and there'll be a space in between those two. So let's just take a look at some fairly basic examples here so that you can kind of get a better feel for what this looks like. So this first command that we're going to take a look at here, okay, so let me add one more parameter here because you would typically do this. Okay, so first of all we have our command. Notice that the command is always a verb dash followed by a noun. In other words, you're always going to be doing something with or to something. So our command here is install dash Windows feature. Okay, and so then next we have to identify the exact feature that we're installing, and so we do that here, and in this instance I'm installing DHCP. Okay, and then after that I have a space and then a dash, and this is, again, if we go back and look at this, this is essentially a required parameter name. I'm including the management tools. Okay, so again, just looking back over this command, we have install dash Windows feature space DHCP space dash include management tools. And so if I hit enter there, it's going to start to install the DHCP feature. Okay, and this will take just a couple of seconds here to finish. And then we can get back to looking at some more commands. The next command I'm going to show you is just going to do the opposite. We're going to uninstall the DHCP feature. So based on the first command that we used to install the feature, you likely can guess the command sequence that we need to use here, and that is uninstall dash Windows feature, and the feature that we are uninstalling is DHCP. So here we have just our command. Again, looking back at the syntax here, we have our command name, which is uninstall dash Windows feature, and then here we don't have any parameters. Essentially all we're doing is identifying the feature that we are uninstalling. Okay, and so if I hit enter on that, it's going to go ahead and uninstall the DHCP feature. Okay, so we'll take a look at a few more commands here just to kind of hopefully help this sink in a little bit. And the rest of these commands I won't run, so we don't have to sit and wait on those. Here's a commonly used command, which again is installing a Windows feature, but instead we're using the command add. So add dash Windows feature, and in this instance this command would install Active Directory domain services, and we would include the management tools for that. So again, this command we have, if we go back and kind of look at our syntax, we have our command name, which is add-Windows feature. We have the feature that we're adding, which is ad-domain-services. And then we have a parameter that we're including, which is to install, essentially include the management tools. Okay, so again, looking at the command spacing and stuff, we have the command name itself, add-Windows feature. Then we have a space, and then the feature that we're actually adding. And notice that can't have any spaces in there, and that's why the dashes are there. So then we have a space, and then dash include management tools. Okay, let's take a look at a totally different command. Say we had Active Directory installed on this computer. We could actually create an Active Directory group. Okay, and a couple of things I want to point out. You notice that I had started typing in caps and I backspaced and did lowercase. PowerShell is not case sensitive, so you can type in all lowercase. The only reason that the caps are used is for readability. But here's an example of another command. The command name is new-ad group. Okay, so we're creating a new Active Directory group. The name of that group is test group. And then here's a parameter. This group is going to be a global group. Notice again where the spaces are, and notice our dash in front of our parameter. Okay, and let's take a look at just one more example. I'm going to start out with the get-vm, get-vm command. This command will get any virtual machines that are running on this machine. So if I hit enter here, notice it shows us that there are 3 virtual machines. They are all 3 in the off state. Okay, so that's just a simple command with no parameters or anything. It's just you know, get the virtual machines. Now let's take a look at how we can use that for other functions. Okay, so this is a little different from what I've shown you, and wasn't addressed here in our command syntax specifically. But what we have here is we have a command name, which is get-vm, and anytime that we want to perform a second command, so in this instance what we're doing is we're getting our virtual machines, and then we're going to do something with those virtual machines. So anytime we're going to perform a second command, in other words we're going to use a second command name, we have to separate those by a pipe. So what I have here is get-vm space pipe, and the pipe is the key just above the enter key on your keyboard. You have to hit shift to get the pipe. So we have get-vm space pipe space and then another command name, export-vm, export-vm space, and then our required parameter. So what we're doing here is we're getting our virtual machines, okay, and we're going to export each of those virtual machines, and we're going to export them to this path. So they're going to be in a folder on the F drive, and the folder name is vm_export1. Okay, so again, it's the exact same command syntax. If you forget about the left side of this, just look at the export-vm. Notice that we have our command name, so we're exporting VMs, and this is where we're exporting them to. And since this is a parameter, we have to include the dash. And again, we've just separated 2 commands by the pipe. So if I was to run this command, it would get all 3 of these VMs, it would do them one at a time, and it would export them, and it would put those VHD files, or VHDX files, in a folder on the F drive, and that folder would be named vm_export1. So again, I hope this was beneficial. When you're looking in your textbook, make sure that you identify the spaces in the command syntax, and actually we'll go to a textbook example here and take a look at it. Okay, so here's an example from one of the textbooks. This specifically is the textbook used for NT303, which covers the identity with Windows Server exam topics. And again, what this is not important really, other than I just want to show you an example of a PowerShell command in the textbook, because they're all visually going to look the same. So here you see a PowerShell command. Notice that you have the actual command name here. So the command name is new-AD group. Okay, so we're creating a new Active Directory group. The name of that group in this example is PSO-group. And then the required parameter here is we've got to identify the group scope. Is it going to be local, global? And in this instance, it's going to be global. So looking at the syntax, we have the command name, which is new-AD group. Then we have a space, and then we have the name of the group, which is PSO-group. Okay, the dash there itself is not part of the command syntax. That's just part of the group name that they've used in this example. Okay, after the group name, we have a space, and this can be hard to see, but there is a space after that P. And then we have the required parameter, which starts out with a dash, and then it gives us the parameter. So in this instance, the group scope is going to be global. So we have dash group scope, space, global. Okay, so again, sometimes these spaces in front of the dashes are hard to see, but just knowing what you know now about the command syntax, going back to this, you know there has to be a space there. Okay. Okay, so hopefully this was helpful in explaining some of the basic PowerShell command syntax, and will help you identify the spaces in the commands when you're getting your commands from the textbook.